It was a ghastly tale of a winter's night. One of an invisible killer and a crime perpetrated on the pavement along Briar Road. As the victim lay at death's door, the mystery of just who had stabbed the young lady from behind had been resolved. But no sooner had my friend saved that Eastern Exchange student from his harrowing plight than in the dim, flickering shadows of gaslight did a second bizarre crime rend the stillness of that very night. I dare say most can still recall the sensational headlines of the day. Haunted apartment of death, the condemned criminal's curse, the dread demon of coal gas. Yet, though the great detective had at once discerned the truth upon his arrival at the scene, it only proved to be the overture that announced the rising of the curtain on a most tragic play.
I suppose that explains why we never saw that man again. My name is Ryunosuke Naruhodo. I'm a fledgling lawyer just starting out on my journey. 6 months ago, I arrived as a visiting student of law, having made the long voyage across the sea from the Empire of Japan to here, London, England. And on the way, in extraordinary circumstances, I made the acquaintance of a world-famous detective. Currently, I reside in the attic of the detective's own lodgings, from where I run my legal consultancy of sorts. I've successfully defended another number of clients in Britain's High Court, the Old Bailey, but since a particularly grueling and unforgettable legal battle 4 months ago now, I haven't returned to the courtroom. In truth, I lost my right to return. But that epic trial was just one small part of an epic tale, a tale which was now about to awaken from slumber. Thanks to a letter that arrived this morning from my homeland. What a delicious smell wafting up the stairs. It must be nearly time for breakfast. I'd better go down to Sholmes's suite and say good morning to the detective and his flatmate. Ah, Runo, good. I was just about to call up to you. The bacon's ready. Good morning, Iris. It smells delicious as usual. Before we eat, though, I have some news. I had a surprise. Shh! Not another word, Mr. Naruhodo. This could just be the abstruse thing for my pre-breakfast stagnation-repelling mental stimulation, my dear fellow. Morning to you, Sholmes. Ah, yes, I see. Personal space. The truth is as clear to me as day. My faculties of observation have revealed it again. What are you talking about? You, Naruhodo, you have, this very morning, met with a surprise. Well, is it not the case? Ah, really, my dear fellow, it barely warrants explanation. Firstly, your hair is particularly unkempt, somewhat reminiscent of a bird's nest. Secondly, you have neglected to fasten the third button of your jacket. Clearly, when considered together, these two facts point to you having been flustered this morning, or you're just nasty. Can I talk now? But of course, though I don't look for admiration, you understand. My hair always looks like this. It's been like this since I first met you. Oh! It has? And the button was ripped off last night, if you remember. By you. Hurley pulled your button off? Ah, yes, I recall the incident now. It was after supper, was it not? As the evening advanced, I picked up my violin and began to play the wailing notes of a haunting tune. But then, to my utter dismay, the third string snapped. Why did it have to happen? Why? Little wonder, then, that in my vexation, I grabbed the first button I saw and ripped it from its proper place. Well, I'd like it back now, please. It's troubling me that I can't fasten my jacket. And it's troubling me that you expect me to know where it is. Somewhere thereabouts on the floor, one presumes. Helpful. What matters at the present time, my dear fellow, is simply whether or not my deduction was unerring. But Hurley, Runo said when he came in, didn't he? I had a surprise this morning. Well, that really is a surprise. Yes, this man is the pride of the British Empire, the famous consulting detective, Mr. Sherlock Sholmes. There can't be a single person in the world who doesn't know his name. Even though you didn't know it like 7 months ago. Alright then, enough of this silly conversation. Come and eat this bacon before it gets cold. And I have a new herbal tea for you to try too, my latest special blend. And here we have Iris Wilson, Sholmes' lodger and companion. A truly exceptional young girl who's the author of a highly successful serialization here in London. Yes, The Adventures of Sherlock Sholmes, as published in Ranced magazine. So, Naruhodo, won't you put us out of our misery? What surprise did you have this fine morning? Ah, well, I received a letter from Japan. Oh, from Susie. What you mean? Was it really? That's right, and she has some rather startling news, in fact. Ah, intriguing indeed. You must tell us about it over breakfast. Oh yes, what fun. Converse. This is the letter that arrived from Japan this morning by international post. I imagine so, yes. Oh, how lovely. Look at Susie's beautiful writing. I wish I could read it. And how is your judicial assistant faring, may I ask? She's very well, thank you. In fact, according to what she's written, she actually appeared as a lawyer at the Japanese Supreme Court and won a case. Ah, really? Oh, isn't she wonderful? A cut above your good self, my dear fellow. Wow, I've won cases too, you know. Apparently, Mr. Natsume appeared in the trial as a witness. Natsume. No, I don't recall that name. Of course you do. We helped the man. Twice. You know, in those 2 cases that took place on Briar Road 6 months ago. Ah, the mustache-twitchy man with the somewhat feline eyes and the mustache. He didn't have 2 mustaches, Hurley. Yes, who could forget those 2 cases? They made a very deep impression on me, as you can clearly tell. Although I must confess the details are a little hazy now. A very deep impression they made on you, clearly. So, what was this startling news penned by Mr. Sato? Do you remember the case of the haunted lodgings, Sholmes? Ah, yes, it's very interesting, you know. I don't feel entirely uncertain that a case of that nature did not occur. He's totally forgotten them. Anyway, in her letter, Mr. Sato asked that we read over the case notes again and investigate further. Though it took place half a year ago, for what purpose? Because of something that Mr. Natsume said to her, apparently. He suggested that the real reason why she was called back to Japan so suddenly might have something to do with that case of the haunted lodgings. Oh. On Mr. Natsume's return to Japan, Mr. Sato's father questioned him about the case, she says. And something Mr. Natsume said appeared to trouble Professor Mikotoba, prompting him to send that telegram. Oh, that case, yes. It was very strange, wasn't it? Yes. And I had compiled the whole story into a nice, neat manuscript ready for publication, too. Then Hurley was here was all funny about it, remember? He was very mean. That story must not be published, you said, very mysteriously as well. Really? I said that. Are you sure? Do you perhaps know something about it as well, Sholmes? About why Susato was suddenly told 4 months ago that she had to return to Japan? It's been 4 months now since we waved Susie off at Dover. It was such a shock, wasn't it, the way she just suddenly announced that she had to go back to Japan. Indeed it was, due to a telegram she received from her homeland, I believe. That's right, telling her to return urgently. Yes, because her father had passed away. No, he was just suffering from a high fever, the cause of which was unknown. He's not dead. But according to this letter, that news about her father's fever was just a ruse. A ruse? So Susie's daddy lied to her that she'd make the voyage back home. Why would he do that? I have to admit I have absolutely no idea. But she believes it's almost certainly related to the case of the haunted lodgings. Summoning her back to Japan so suddenly like that, I wonder what Mr. Sato's father is hiding. Hurley, do you know what it's all about? Ah, well, who can say? What? But you said... Please, I have engagements, my dear fellow. My calendar is quite surprisingly full today. And a stringent analysis of the matter would be excessive, I feel, even if I were quite at leisure. So, man the fort in my absence, won't you, Iris? I will, Hurley, don't worry. See you later. He scuttled off rather quickly. Yes, he did indeed. I thought that. Hey, you know, just eject yourself. I think perhaps Professor Mikotoba isn't the only person hiding something here. Soseki-san was involved in 2 cases, but only one of them was forbidden from being published. By, of all people, Sholmes. Aha! I've found them at last. Iris, are they... The notes about the case? That's right. Susie and I compiled them together. The case of the haunted lodgings. Do you want to read them, Runa? Absolutely. Thank you, Iris. I have no idea what secrets could still be hiding in the shadows of this case, but perhaps if I read over the notes again, something might come to light. That's the spirit. And so, Iris and I decided to read the case notes again together. Everything from what happened to our investigation and that fierce battle in court that followed. Reliving every detail. I just need to find a clue, and I have all the time in the world. Because, of course, I'm no longer allowed to practice law in the courts of Great Britain. For now. It was 6 months ago, a mysterious incident that unfolded on the wintry streets of London. A young woman was found lying on the snowy pavement of Briar Road with a knife in her back. Fortunately, her life was spared, but she was unconscious for several days following the incident. The fog was thick and nobody saw her attacker, but, by a cruel of twists of fate, a visiting Japanese student was walking behind her at the time and was duly arrested. That man was Soseki-san, and the man who effected his arrest was Sholmes. Believing in our compatriot's innocence, Sosato and I decided to represent Soseki in court, and after a grueling trial of many twists and turns, we finally managed to prove his innocence.
Joyful, joyous, jubilant jubilation!
Was the man's reaction after the trial, but his jubilant jubilation was short-lived. We received a telegram from Sholmes the following morning. The victim of the Briar Road stabbing has regained consciousness. Hurry to Bart's at once. So, Sosato and I summoned a hansom and headed immediately to the hospital. That was very far from what I originally read it as, actually, damn. Oh, look at this little man. Oh, look at this little boy. Oh, shit. There you are at last. Good morning, Sholmes. I think not. Oh.
You're late! What on earth took you so long?
Your telegram only arrived at 5 o'clock, Sholmes, and it's a 20-minute ride to the hospital. That's right, and it's 5:30 now. I think we made pretty good time. The time is utterly irrelevant. The fact is, I have been waiting for what has felt like an eternity. In point of fact, I myself was awoken at 4 this morning by a telegram boy, and feeling it was somewhat unjust that I alone had been roused at such an hour, I sent one to you. Well, thanks for that. Anyway, you're here now. So, the victim is over there. She's only just regained consciousness. You should introduce yourselves, and I shall observe from here. So that's the lady who was found in the snow-covered pavement. Her name is... Ah, yes, here we are. Miss Green. Madame... Hold on. Let's pet this boy. Eek! A mouse. An enormous mouse. Don't be rude to the mouse. Vermin in a hospital? That doesn't seem the best. But it looks like a very healthy specimen, doesn't it? It's very plump. I'm not sure we can say that's down to excellence of this facility, if that's what you were thinking. Ah, good morning. Hello, I'm Ryunosuke Naruhodo from the Empire of Japan.
Oh no! Was it your knife that... Are you the man who...
No, I'm a lawyer. And I'm Sosato Mikatoba, pleased to meet you.
Oh no! Was it your knife then? Are you the one?
No, I assure you, I'm Naruhodo's judicial assistant. We heard that you'd regained consciousness and wanted to come and give you our best wishes.
Best wishes? For me? Thank you? I'm Olive Green. I'm an artist. Well, no, that's not right, is it? What I mean is, I'm trying to be an artist.
Well, what I really mean is, I desperately wanted to be an artist.
But the truth is, I don't have any talent.
Huh, pretty relatable.
I know I don't. It's no wonder I was stabbed in the back.
I don't think that's related, actually. Gosh, this young woman seems to bend over backwards to put herself down. Seeing as we're here, we should ask her about what happened from her perspective, I suppose. To suddenly be struck in the back by a blade as you were walking along the pavement. What a terrible experience you had, Miss Green.
It was so cold that day, and the fog was so thick, I couldn't see a thing. That was 4 days ago now, I think. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. I'm afraid you've been comatose all that time.
But the case has been solved, hasn't it? While I was here in the hospital, I mean.
Indeed it has, my dear madam. Spectacularly, by none other than I, Sherlock Sholmes, legally distinct. Mr. Sholmes, as you know, it was Mr. Naruhodo's hard work in court that solved the case. Are you yet to hear what happened, Miss Green?
Yes, I'm afraid so. A gentleman from the police force is supposed to be coming to fill me in shortly.
Oh, I see.
Me coming round seems to have made everyone frantically busy. I'm so sorry. I never should have regained consciousness. It was very selfish of me.
Relax. No, we're also relieved that you're on the mend, Miss Green. We are. With that kind of attitude, maybe her surname should be Blue, not Green. So, you're an artist, are you, Miss Green?
Oh, no, I couldn't possibly claim that. I'm a fledgling artist at best. I mean, I'm a student of art, really, at the Thorndike Academy of Fine Arts.
Oh my, an Academy of Fine Arts. Great Britain is such a wonderful country. Tell me, Miss Green, do you live hereabouts?
Oh, no, actually. I don't deserve it, but I have a little flat on Brixton Road.
I see. How very interesting.
Oh, no. Is it?
Brixton is some 10 stops away on the underground from here, and Thorndike Academy is a mere 3-minute walk from Brixton town centre. The underground existed at this point in time? I know very little history about my own country, I guess. Does that matter, Sholmes? Perhaps not, but Briar Road is a far less salubrious part of the town by comparison, dwelt in by those of inferior means, including the maleficent Mr. Mustache. Inferior means, I suppose Soseki-san does fit the bill. It struck me as somewhat out of the ordinary for a young fine arts student to be walking in such a district, that's all. What's this? She suddenly clammed up. Mr. Sholmes, you should be ashamed of yourself prying into a young maiden's private affairs. Oh, dear me, do forgive me.
If you don't mind, I'm being discharged shortly, so I need to pack up my things.
Ah, yes, of course, we won't keep you. Thank you so much, Miss Green. Well, I guess we're leaving. Maybe not. Well, Unless somebody's here to talk to. No. Ah, you look busy. Iris. That's incredible concentration, that is. I find it quite remarkable how she can focus on so many different things at once. Perhaps I should try drinking some herbal tea. The blend third from the right would be good for you, Runo. Oh, Iris? This girl is destined for great things, I'm sure. Never mind. I guess I was like, you know, I guess we'll leave. I don't want to be fucking rude. I guess we'll poke at all her private things. Let's flip this bad boy over. Can't do that? Okay. Look, there's a photograph in this frame. This guy looks like a real fucking nerd. Oh yes, it's a picture of a young gentleman. He looks to be about the same age as Miss Green, I would say. Perhaps the young woman's special someone, do you think? My mind, Mr. Naruhodo, I didn't know you had a sense of matters of the heart. Not in the least, I sincerely said the first thing I thought of. Oh, that was it? Okay. Is there a Mr. Narrow Fodder here? Mr. Narrow Fodder. Narrow Fodder now. Well, if you're looking for Naruhodo, the lawyer, that's me, but... Ah, Mr. Narrow Fodder. Good. This is for you. It's a message from a Mr. Saucy Nutsmeg. It's a message from who? Are you fucking with me? Is that what their name actually is? Mr. Nuts. Okay. Just can't pronounce shit. Alright. That was, like, just wild enough that I could have believed it was in this game. Mr. Natsume sent a message to me. But why would a policeman be delivering a message from Mr. Natsume? Exactly. What's going on? So, as it turns out, I've been arrested again. Ah, what are you waiting for? Let me see that. Oh. Well, this is most unexpected. Is something wrong, Sholmes? Is something wrong, Sholmes? He says. Have you not seen this note? No, how could I have? It would seem that London's criminals have no intention of letting the great detective rest. A new case calls. A case of murder, no less. We must depart at once. Murder? Call a cab. Time is of the essence. But the trouble is, we've yet to read Mr. Natsume's note. I was thinking we ought to pay him a visit in his lodgings. No need, he's in prison. That will be entirely convenient. Convenient? What do you mean? It's all here in the note, my dear fellows. The murder we must investigate took place in Mr. Mustache's lodgings. Wait, what? I'll hail a ficray? Ficray at once? What the we're calling it something different every time. It was only yesterday that Soseki-san was in court and we were dispelling doubts about his innocence. And now, the very next day, there's a murder at the man's address. He may very well be the unluckiest man alive. Or so it seemed to us at the time. But we were soon to discover it was worse than we thought. Alright, I'm excited. Oh, he's dead as fuck. What on earth? Oh my, the gentleman is deceased without question. He's dead. He's not alive.
Locum student Mr. Naruhodo, Esquire.
Mr. Natsume?
Oh, why? Why is this happening? Why to me? I've only just got out of court yesterday. I was finally home after 2 days of misery. And then I wake up the next day to this. No early bird should catch a worm like this. Woeful worm without wiggle.
I see you're in high spirits again this morning, Mr. Mustache.
Ah, not the horrible hairlock Sholmes. Shoo, shove off, show yourself the door. I never invited you.
Mr. Sholmes came here with us. I'm quite sure he'll be able to help you, Mr. Natsume. I am entirely at your disposal, Mr. Mustache. What can I do for you?
Yeah.
Here they are, already. The busybodies. Ah, Inspector Gregson. What a pleasant surprise. Pleasant, is it? gives me heartburn every time I see your face at a crime scene, Sholmes. Ha! I deduce, Inspector, that your heartburn is a result of your excessive consumption of fried food. Good morning, Inspector. This is a crime scene. Don't go touching anything. Or good morning to you too, Sunshine. You look absolutely thrilled, Soseki. What a terrible thing to have happened. It's only been 3 days. Oh no,
It's only been 3 days since I was arrested for the incident on the pavement outside. And then, having finally regained my freedom, it starts happening all over again. Endless existence of excruciating experiences.
So the victim lived here on the ground floor and your room is just 1 story up, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. In a way, we were neighbors, I suppose.
So did you know the victim? Were you friends? We're not gonna like the answer to this question. This is gonna be a unfortunate series of events. What's the matter with Soseki now? It was an innocent enough question, wasn't it? Why does he seem so shaken?
Well, I suppose he wasn't a complete stranger. But did he ever invite me into his room? No, never. On my honor, I swear it.
What an extreme reaction. You're probably wishing you'd never asked now, aren't you, Mr. Naruhodo?
When we found him here, I felt wretched, which is why I sent word asking you to come. Through that inspector over there.
Please, tell us more. So, Inspector, what was the victim's name? Who was he? Mr. William Shakespeare. Alright. He was a lodger here. As you can probably tell, he was an actor. Bit of a dead loss as it happens, or just dead. Mr. Shakespeare. It was the landlord, old man Gary, and the other lodger, Mr. Natsume, who found him. The fella didn't raise at his usual hour, so Gary got worried and kicked the door in. But doesn't Mr. Gary have a bad leg? Yeah, you're right there. It was that jittery Japanese hunchback over there who actually did the kicking. Really, Soseki? The victim was pretty hard up, it seems, even done some time inside for petty crimes. He had no money, no place to go, no friends, his only acquaintances were the people in his house. Miserable life, and a miserable end to it. So, what exactly is Natsume still doing here? He's not involved in the investigation, so shouldn't you have sent him away from the crime scene? Oh, he's the murderer. Well, I'm not saying it's because the fella looks odd or anything, or he acts suspicious, but he does do all those things. I thought it would be prudent to take a statement from the culprit. I mean, cohabiter. You nearly said culprit there, didn't you? Oh dear. Mr. Natsume appears to be under suspicion again. It certainly seems that way. He does just come across as such an odd fellow, doesn't he? Poor man. How unfortunate. Anyway, I can't say much till the coroner gets here. But I don't think the fella's been a goner that long. Body's still warm. Even if the inspector would allow it, I don't think I could bring myself to touch a dead body. Sholmes, what are you up to? Sholmes, what are you doing? Ha! You need only observe to know it, my dear fellow. Investigating. Naturally. There's nothing natural about that pose. Sholmes! Have you made some miraculous discovery? Patience, my dear madam, patience. We've not been in this room more than 5 minutes. So far, all I've managed to deduce is what actually happened. My goodness. But isn't that everything we need to know? Now that you propose the idea, I believe one could indeed see it that way, if they were a buffoon. At the present time, I have managed to draw 2 incontrovertible conclusions. The first, that there was a physical struggle here last night in which the victim fought for his life. Natsume, what's wrong? Is something that Sholmes said significant somehow?
No, don't mind me. Forget I was here.
And my second conclusion is that there was a poison lingering in the air last night that passed the victim's lips.
Nonsense!
Alright, Natsume, why are you reacting so extremely to Sholmes?
No, please pretend I'm not here. Invisible, ineffable, inscrutable, insignificant.
Impossible to ignore. You must tell us everything, Sholmes. Spare no detail. But of course, let the theatrical tragedy before us be unraveled by great deductions for your pleasure in 2 acts. I just want to point out, this pipe looks like it got welded back together. And it's connected to the gas line. We've heard some truly astounding great deductions from Sholmes in the past. No doubt this will be no exception. What miracles will unfold before our eyes. So, my dear fellows, for your delight and wonder, let the curtain rise. For Herlock Sholmes' logic and reasoning spectacular. Act 1. Alright, I'm gonna get hydrated for this one. I'm ready. Careful observation of the victim reveals to us the events that transpired in this disconsolate room last night. Foam at the mouth of the deceased clearly indicates the use of poison. Is this a bar of fucking soap? Next to the victim, we notice a large dining plate which contains, you will observe, 1/2 of a sizable bar of soap. Meaningful, indubitably. My man's gas pipe got cut and he was hallucinating pretty fucking bad before he died. Why is this soap set so purposefully upon the dish? Like the victim's last supper, in fact. Yes. Could it be that the man was about to eat it? Of course, the fork reveals the answer. It appears that the young man's appetite was his undoing. Taking up arms in the form of his cutlery, the victim engaged in a deadly battle for his life. Yet the struggle against his hunger was in vain, for in the end he couldn't resist devouring the slippery feast. But London's foul soap is besmirched by foul poison. Yes, the victim's life was claimed by poison, by the poison that tainted the contents of the plate. The soap and the lather about the young man's mouth are too perfectly matched to ignore. The cause of death was clearly intoxication due to excessive ingestion of foul soap. Though, personally, I have a greater interest in the taste of foul candle wax, of course. Alright, that's all pretty exciting. I'm liking where this is going so far. I also enjoy the idea that the soap is just made of poison. That seems helpful, you know. With the cause of death identified, we proceed to Act 2, where we ponder the next question. Was this suicide or murder? This would be the most ludicrous method of suicide known to man. The audience will recall that death occurred during the victim's last supper. Did the man dine and die alone? This single teacup suggests the answer. To draw a conclusion on such meager evidence would be foolish, however, certainly. The careful criminal could have absconded with his own cup to cover his tracks. Well, allow me to lift the veil of doubt, my dear fellow. Indeed, what reveals the answer, of course, is the broken lock. But, now, Sholmes, I don't mean to, interrupt you or anything, but they kicked the door in to get into this room to investigate the death. Though forced open now, at the time of the incident, this door was locked. And the sole key was in the victim's pocket. In other words, when the victim consumed the poison, he must have been alone. Alone with his inferior soap, which from whence wafted an inferior scent. And with that acrid aroma lingering in the air, the victim met his end in tragic solitude. We can take comfort only in the fact that his soul was well cleansed on its way to the hereafter. Ah, soap for the body and the mind. Thus concludes the final act of Herlock Sholmes's great deduction. I almost called him Hairlock again. There's just one thing, Sholmes. You are disposed to identifying just one thing, aren't you, Mr. Naruhodo? Pray, what concerns you? Well, no matter how hungry he is, do you really think the man would have eaten soap? If he was hallucinating? It is quite apparent that this man had barely a penny to his name. It is a curious thing, but to one so destitute, soap can appear quite irresistibly appetizing. I'm pretty poor, but I've never really thought about eating soap before, you know? How extraordinary. In truth, I have tried a little soap myself in the past. You've eaten it, you mean? My dear fellow, it was some time ago now. My postulation was that it would cleanse my gut. And did it? As I writhed in agony on the floor and spilt the contents of my stomach, yes, I believe it did. The experience taught me a valuable lesson. Soap is quite poisonous. It has an unpleasant taste and leads to great discomfort. In summary, I cannot recommend it. Believe me, I wouldn't have eaten it if you did. There is something that troubles me as well, actually. Oh, what's that? It's Mr. Natsume. Ah! I couldn't help notice him shuddering and quivering out of the corner of my eye, almost as if Sholmes's deductions touched a nerve somehow.
No, nonsense.
Well, that clenched teeth episode didn't last. I think, judging by Mr. Natsume's reaction, the great detective's deductions may need some gentle corrections in order to reach the actual truth. Yes, Sholmes's observations and deductions are sometimes a little too sharp, if you catch my drift. He has a tendency to hit the nail on the side of the head and drive it at an obtuse angle. When he does that, it falls to us to straighten things out. Alright then, let's see what we can do. Yes, we must pick the keywords. Indeed, I have done the first game. If we can do that, I'm sure we'll arrive at what Sholmes has to say. In that case, are you ready for the second performance of the day? Once again, my dear fellows, for your continued delight and wonder, let the curtain rise for Herlock Sholmes' Logic and Reasoning Spectacular, Act 1. Yep, he's dead as fuck. Look at this foam, though. Bar of soap, suspicious. How about that? Meaningful, indubitably. Was it like the victim's Last Supper, in fact? Yes. Could it be the man was weeded? The fork reveals the answer. Well, you can't deny a fork implies the man was eating something, or about to eat something. Yes, that's true. If I were to decide to eat some soap, I should prefer to use a fork than attempt to eat it with chopsticks. And of course, only half of the bar of soap is left on the plate. But might there be some other explanation? Something material that proves whether or not the man really ate some soap? Oh, there's the other half. I'm so disappointed. I'm so mad. Look, there's some more soap on the floor here. Mr. Shamspeare must have really loved that stuff. Let's not jump to conclusions, Mr. Naruhodo. Look closely at this soap. Do you see that it would fit together perfectly with the half bar on the table? How could that be? I think that they are two halves of the same bar that broke apart. My disappointment is immeasurable. And my day is ruined. So what, am I presenting that? Soap. Type. Alright. Could it be that the man was about to eat it? Of course. The other piece of soap reveals the answer. For it being the other half of the soap on the table ensured the victim was not eating soap at all. But it's obvious, really, for no depths of hunger could drive any man to attempt to eat soap. Even I, with my unquenchable thirst for practical knowledge, only took a single bite. But that begs the question of how the man was poisoned, because there's no sign of any food on the table. If only there were some other implement on the table with which he could have been poisoned. An excellent observation, Mr. Naruhodo, one that furnishes us with the answer we seek. For London's foul soap is besmirched by foul poison. Yes, the victim's life was claimed by that tainted the contents of the plate. Sholmes is still pushing the soap argument. Perhaps he's suggesting the man licked the soap rather than ate it. If the soap in London is that poisonous, I don't think I want to be washing my hands with it. But there are no signs of any food in this room. Of course, food isn't the only thing that passes people's lips, is it? Sure isn't.
Take that!
Though I'm more inclined to believe he died from gas poisoning, to be honest. But hey, you know, maybe he got drugged, actually. If they drugged him so he passed out and then the gas killed him, maybe. I'm sure the gas is going to come into it. That's what I'm wagering it all right now. Gas was involved. The victim's life was claimed by the poison that tainted the teacup. Indeed, cups have been vessels of choice for practicing poisoners over the centuries. And it would appear that this victim drank every last drop, except for the drop on the table. There's no sign of food anywhere in the room. Which leads us to the immutable conclusion. The cause of death was clearly intoxication due to ingestion of poison contained in this teacup. Solved. The cause of death identified, we proceed to Act 2, where we ponder the next question. Was this suicide or murder? The audience will recall Last Supper. Did the man die? No, the single teacup suggests the answer. The Western vessel for infused hot drinks again. It's already featured heavily in our deductions. Yes, we can imagine that shortly before his death, Mr. Shamspeare was having a drink of tea. There would be nothing remarkable about that, but what troubles me is Mr. Natsume's reaction when he heard Sholmes suggest it. There's more to the deduction, it seems. We must examine the scene of the crime closely. What do we got? Where is it? The guy's hat down here, but that doesn't seem too important. Oh, wait, what? Oh, it's right fucking there, huh?
Take that!
My man did be clenching things when he died, huh? Could I have seen this earlier when it swang around? I'm very disappointed if I missed it. Yes, there are 2 teacups in this room all along, with a bar of soap for the side, perhaps to dip in the tea. In other words, this is a strong indication that the victim's Last Supper, there was a guest present. At the very least, we could say now with certainty that somebody else was here in this room last night, taking tea with the victim.
What are you talking about? Utterly, unbelievably, unjustly unreasonable.
To draw a conclusion on such meager evidence would be foolish, however, certainly. In which case, what more can we deduce? Well, allow me to lift the veil of doubt, my dear fellows. Do you mean to say you know exactly who was in the room at the time of the victim's death? Indeed, what reveals the answer is, of course, the broken lock. I'm not sure I like where this deduction is going now. I'm afraid it's too late to go back to the halcyon days of eating too much soap. I remember it like it was yesterday. But the identity of the guest who was in here last night when the victim passed away is something I have a very bad feeling about. Well, you can try to ignore your feelings, but we cannot ignore the truth. No, I suppose not. Time to look around. Uh-oh. No, not the glasses. Okay. Empty bottle? What gives away the identity of the victim? Candle? Why can't I look at the fucking candle? Pile of books? Oh, pile of book. Oh, no. Pile of books. At first glance, it seems the only things in this room are makeshift stages and the costumes. I overlooked these 3 books initially. I wonder what they are. Oh, this is not going to be good. The picture of, yeah, I'm sure I've heard those titles before. It could just be an incredible coincidence, but they're the exact same 3 books Natsume purchased. What? Yes, on the day of the unfortunate incident when Green was stabbed, Soseki-san had been at the bookshop and bought them. That's right. And now those 3 books are here in the room of the victim. Yet Natsume claims to have never been here before. What does this mean, do you think? I really don't know what to make of it. Well, pile of familiar books.
Take that!
Yo, look at this little mouse. He's amazing. Indeed, what reveals the answer, of course, is the pile of familiar books. Quite so! It is no mere coincidence that these 3 titles are here in this room. It's the link to the truth. Mr. Natsume, you purchased these books 4 days ago at a secondhand bookshop.
That's just a coincidence.
In that case, you will be able to bring the same 3 titles from your own room, will you not? This very moment?
No, never, non-negotiable.
If you can't bring your own copies here, it proves that these 3 books are, in fact, yours. Having purchased the books 4 days ago and returned to your lodgings, you were arrested the very next day. So you could conceivably have brought the books here that evening, but you never mentioned that. In other words, you could have only brought these 3 books here to the victim's room. What jazzy oh my man is fucking swaggering all over the street. Last night, having returned to your lodgings after the trial concluded at the Old Bailey. In short, there is only one possible conclusion. The victim died here in this very last room as a result of poisoning. And that same night, the victim had a visitor. And that visitor was you, Mr. Soseki Natsume. Thus concludes the final act of Sherlock Holmes' great deduction. Unfortunate.
Yeah. Not again. Not again. Not again. Not again.
Well then, Mr. Natsume, it would appear you're gonna have to accompany me down to the yard. Again.
But wait. Hold your horses.
Yes.
Door key locked. Entry, exit entirely impossible.
He's so flustered he's being even stranger than normal. What? You think that's an alibi? You could have just made a copy.
What?
You live in the same building after all. You've had plenty of opportunity, I'm sure.
But. Misery me.
Sorry, sir. You'll get your chance to give your side of the story later. The facts speak for themselves, Mr. Mustache.
You horrible Sherlock Holmes.
He really has found himself an arch rival now, hasn't he? Come on now, no dilly-dallying outside. There's a carriage waiting.
Locum student, Mr. Naruhodo Esquire. I'd never imagined to be in this position again, but you have to help me, please, please. I'm innocent.
Alright, I understand. We'll come to your cell later and talk about it.
And one more thing.
Oh, yes.
My poor little kitty cat. Please give him his breakfast for me.
And so, his evil curse still apparently unbroken, Soseki-san found himself once again the prime suspect in a case of murder. Thanks to the incriminating deduction of the great detective. Well, I feel like Sholmes is getting kind of unfairly blamed for this deduction, to be honest with you, given he initially said nothing about him. My dear fellows, that honor belongs to you. Even he knows. Well, at least that means Inspector Gregson is no longer here. We can examine the crime scene in more detail now. Yes, that's right. And of course, what? Have you forgotten what the inspector mentioned before? It was the landlord, Mr. Gary, who discovered Mr. Shamspear. Ah, Mr. John Gary, yes. I expect we could find him in his sitting room on the top floor as usual. Right, we must remember to go and talk to him later then. Ah, right, this pipe. Nope. We're examining this. I want to examine the pipe. And here we have another disproportionately large machine. This looks like a meter of some kind. Ah, this is a gas meter, I think. Correct. It seems that in this district, residents pay for gas as they use it with coins. Ah, I see. Yes, now that you've pointed that out, I can see that there's a slot here that looks like it would take a coin. So you mean if you put a coin in here? That's right. That would buy you about 2 hours of gas for lights and heating. So if you were a poor person with no money, you'd have to sleep in the freezing cold? Yes. Or if you were a scatterbrain with no change because you forgot to exchange your money at the bank. Thank goodness there's no meter in our office. I honed in on this pipe immediately. No, don't examine it again. Like, that's such a suspicious looking line. Yeah. Look at these extravagant bright costumes. Somehow they look out of place in this room with its grim, shady goings-on. This one looks like a king's attire. A king? I've always dreamt of being a king. Oh, I think you'd be more suited to a feudal lord. A daimyo, or such like. With a Chon mage top knot. Every Japanese man wishes he had a Chon mage. Oh, you'd look wonderful with one. You already have the sword. Could you imagine what would happen if I walked around the streets of London with a Chon mage and a sword? What's this? What's this? It looks like part of an envelope, I think. Yes, I think you may be right. Perhaps it was torn off when the letter was opened. Is that significant? It's a weird way it's been torn off, though. It's the edge. Well, it's a little out of place, perhaps, when you look around the room. There's no sign of a letter, or the rest of the envelope, in fact. She's right. And yet, here we have the torn-off end of an envelope. It just strikes me as unusual. I agree. We'd better take this, just in case. Alright. The cup. Ah, one of the teacups that Mr. Shamspear and his guests drank from. But don't go drinking from them, Naruhodo. There's bitter poison inside. I'm not planning on drinking any, don't worry. Anyway, the cups are both empty. That's true, so one was Shamspear's, and the other must have been the cup that Natsume was drinking from. But Soseki wasn't poisoned, of course. Perhaps we should take these two so we can examine them in more detail. Let's do that right fucking now. Doesn't look like there's a whole lot going on with these cups, though, you know. This is the teacup from Natsume was drinking. Yes, unlike the other one, the inside of the cup is completely clean. Oh, I see, it is. I suppose he must have drunk the contents before the tea had a chance to leave a mark. I always gulp it down, too. Sorry, Mr. Naruhodo? Well, if you just sip it little by little, it gets cold. Clearly, I shall have to instruct you in the proper way to take tea. Alright, good talk. Does this have anything on it? Have a little gander inside, maybe. Whoever opened this envelope didn't bother with a letter opener or scissors, did they? Yes, whoever opened it was clearly someone with an unrefined temperament. And judging from the angle of the rip here, the person in question must have been right-handed. Miss Sosato? I think perhaps someone's been reading too much of The Adventures of Sholmes. You can never read too much, Naruhodo, never. I'm just upset that my man ripped the fucking end off instead of just opening the flap. Alright. Oh, the poor man. So young to die. Do you suppose it was a very painful death, being poisoned as he was? I don't know. All we can do now is hope he'll be reborn to a better life. Yes, I suppose you're right. I wonder. Do you think that putting our hands together in a Japanese prayer will help a British soul? Sorry. I made sure I had a reference at the ready for just such an occasion as this, actually. This book is entitled The Beginner's Guide to Praying for the Departed, the British Way. I'll just reread it now. One moment. There's quite a spine on that book, isn't there? Window still blocked off. As we've seen from the outside, the window is completely bricked up. A vestige of the former window tax that Britons had to pay. What strange things they used to tax here. I mean, making people pay for a number of windows they had in a property. It's extraordinary. Yeah, we like money, you know? It's heartbreaking to think of the poor having to block up their windows just to avoid an unaffordable tax. Oh. What is it, Mr. Sato? If you look closely, a number of the bricks are loose. Oh, they are. Why does this man have so much fucking soap? Oh, yes. It looks as though an amateur has broken out a few of them just here. Was it Shamspeare who did it, I wonder, being the lodger renting this room? Ah, look at this, Mr. Naruhodo. On the outside, there's a little ledge, and there's something on it. What? Outside? Observe, yet more soap. Brr, it's so cold outside, you can feel it through this gap. It did snow all last night, it would be cold. But more importantly, what is it on the ledge out there? What are those snow-covered lumps? It's more bars of soap. Soap? What are bars of soap doing lined up on a ledge? Do you think he was making soap? I have no idea. But the pair of them look rather charming like that. Still, that's very strange, isn't it? Bars of soap lined up outside the window. I think perhaps we should take one. There are two, after all. Oh dear, I suppose we could. Oh, what's this? Here, look at this soap. Do you see? In the middle, there. Oh, there's a patch that's a different color. It's sort of transparent, but some sort of fancy design, I suppose. Only in Great Britain. It looks like the Hinamura flag of Japan, doesn't it? How wonderful. It's probably just a very expensive brand. Expensive? Then what's it doing in this ramshackle old room? Yeah, it's pretty weird. My man had a lot of fucking soap, huh? Looks like you were having a good snoop around, eh? Inspector Gregson, back so soon? After I threw that little Japanese fella in the clink, I went and reported this to the investigation division. In 5 minutes' time, this place will be cordoned off by the yard. Oh, I see. Well, we better be leaving then. Poor Mr. Natsume must be feeling very low being back in his cell so soon. Sorry, I want to look at the soap before I forget. This part is a different color. It's been pretty wedged in there, huh? It's an exquisite design, isn't it? Trust the British to turn a boring bar of soap into something special. I quite like it. It reminds me of the Hinamura flag design. I expect this is a rather expensive soap. No. Nothing else to say about the soap? Alright. I'm sure we should probably go and... Oh. I see. What's wrong, Mr. Naruhodo? Ah!
Out, out, brief candle, life's but a walking shadow, a poor player. That struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. Now, how soundeth the next part?
It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing.
Indeed, oh happy day!
Oh.
What? Walking Dead.
That was certainly something.
The fella isn't dead at all. What was that nonsense he was saying, though?
I think, yes, it was from William Shakespeare's Macbeth, a soliloquy from Act 5, Scene 5. Shakespeare? So it was that the victim, Mr. William Shamspeare, came back to life. If the man had indeed been poisoned, it transpired it hadn't killed him. He was taken by emergency carriage to a nearby hospital for treatment. And Inspector Gregson evicted us from the scene of the crime. Whatever that now was. Yeah, it's getting pretty fucking weird, huh? Oh, hello, sir. What you up to? Whatever do you think will happen now? Good question. What a strange situation for Mr. Natsume, arrested for murder, then the victim comes back to life. I think perhaps the victim was never dead in the first place. It seems very likely that Mr. Shamspeare did consume poison as we deduced, but it was an accident, attempted suicide, or attempted murder. Until the truth can be established, I imagine the police will keep Natsume in custody. I suppose so. Let's hope it doesn't come to anything more than a night in the cells. Oh, what's this? What's that man doing over there? It looks like he's trying to see into Soseki-san's lodgings. Is this yet more soap? Is something wrong, Mr. Naruhodo? Excuse me, could we have a word? Ah! Are you gonna fucking battle us? What was that? He just ran off. I feel sure I've seen that man. Yes, we have. I do too, but I don't remember. It was outside this very building. I wish to examine. Is this more fucking soap? Yeah, all bricked up. Yes, because of an old tax. Tax abolished. Won't be opened up. Sad state of affairs. Cheap accommodation. Okay, I guess we're not like, look, I'm pretty suspicious about that fucking window. What's up with this bike? There always seems to be a bicycle outside the Gary residence. I read that bicycles are extremely popular all over Great Britain. This one seems very warped, though, especially the front wheel. Is that to make it more of a challenge to ride, do you think? No, I'm afraid that's just the result of the rider's incompetence. For the front wheel to be so badly warped, I'm afraid the rider may have been similarly afflicted. Then there's a good chance Mr. Natsume has been practicing on this bicycle, I think. Well, that's fucking rude, isn't it? Anything on the other side of the street? I mean, there's a snowman. He looks like he's having a great time. Let's go back in and talk to Gary. Here we are again. The eccentric landlord's eccentric top floor abode. We're here because Mr. Gary was the one who discovered the incident this morning, don't forget. Ah, you chaps, eh? Yes, good morning, sir. Thank you for your cooperation in court yesterday. It was quite a trial. As much for Mr. Gary as anyone, really. Came straight back here after all that business at the Bailey yesterday. Didn't expect to wake up to more bolly nonsense this morning. I wonder if you wouldn't mind telling us what happened? Yes, I suppose you'd like to know all about that dead loss of an actor chap in the ground floor room. Those were exactly Inspector Gregson's words, weren't they? Tell us more, sir. It must have been a real shock for you this morning. I hear that you discovered what had happened. Ah, well, that hopeless actor chap races at 5 o'clock sharp every morning without fail. But at 5:30 this morning, he still hadn't lit the gas. So I went down and knocked on his door, but no bolly answer. And that's when you broke into his room by kicking down the door? Well, I call on that rum-looking Japanese chap to do the grunt work, of course. Wasn't it a little premature to kick the door down? The man could have just overslept by half an hour. That's very true. It took 30 minutes. If 30 minutes oversleep warranted such behavior, I'd have to kick your door down every day. Well, you know, better to be safe than sorry and all that. Is it just me, or is he avoiding our gaze? He suspects the gas might have been responsible, I feel. Except that it was such a sorry situation indeed that you found on the far side of the door. The victim's name is Mr. Shamspeare, I believe. Is that right? Yes, William Shakespeare. Took the ground floor room 3 months ago now. And how would you describe him? In a word, destitute. Destitute? Well, let's face it, the only redeeming feature of that room is the cheap rent. Anyone wanting to live in a place like that is either broke or has a bally screw loose. So hard to choose which category Soseki would fall into. Mr. Naruhodo, that's a little rude. He was doing research as well. Research? Into what? Soap? Shakespeare, of course. Shakespeare. Read a few plays of the old bard myself, you know. Romeo and Hamlet and all that. Yes, I believe that's exactly what it was called. Yes, William Shakespeare is England's most highly regarded classical playwright and author. He's known as Sao in Japanese, as you know, and many of his works have already been translated. It seems incredible that Shakespeare was shortened to Sao, though. Someone was too heavy-handed there. There were a lot of costumes in the victim's room, actually, weren't there? Of course, Mr. Natsume is a scholar of English literature as well. I imagine him and Shakespeare would have had much in common. Shakespeare interpretation disagreement leads to shocking murder. Let's hope it's not that. Mr. Naruhodo, really, how rude. After Mr. Natsume's trial yesterday, you came straight back here, I believe, didn't you? Did you notice anything strange between then and this morning? Well now, it must have been about 6 in the evening by the time I got home. Snow was coming down rather heavily as I remember, and it was completely dark already. That fail-acted chap was out at the time. Mr. Gary noticed that there was no light in his room or something, I suppose. Couldn't summon the energy for anything much though, so I just sat in front of the fire up here. It was after 8 before Shakespeare got back. And the chap was up until past 1 in the morning, I'll have you now. Suppose he met his end sometime after that. I was asleep by then, so I'm rather in the dark there. Well, thank you, that was very illuminating. Was it really? Is everything alright, Mr. Sato? Well, I was just thinking that it's a little strange, that's all. Mr. Gary, you were up here in your room all evening. Yeah, so how do you know he was up at 1? There's a whole floor between you and him, isn't there? Because he's on the ground floor, you're on the top floor. Not a big fan of stairs, not with this blasted leg. Then, how is it that you seem to know the precise movements of your tenants on the ground floor, I mean? Ah! That's a very good point. I can't imagine that you would hear noises from the ground. You saw that hole in the guy's wall, right? Do you think he snoops around in their fucking walls and looks at them? Can't imagine you could hear noises from the ground floor all the way up here. Does this old man like to spy on his tenants? Is that it? I say, I know what you're thinking, and it's a bolly outrage. I'm ex-military, don't you know? I don't go around spying on my tenants. Why would I? Then how did you know, Mr. Gary? It was the gas woman. The gas tells me everything. The gas? Maybe I was being a little overly dramatic, as I just thought back to that boarded up hole that was in the wall, like, what if he's snooping in the walls? What on earth do you mean, sir? How can the gas tell you anything, let alone everything? Well, as you're probably aware, the gas is supplied to the building by pipes. Yes, I'd more or less worked that out. Every room in the building is connected by a single pipe to the gas main outside, and the gas company supplies gas to properties via the main. Yes, I understand that too. Let me see if I can explain. Let's say I was to light the gas lamps up here. What do you suppose would happen? Well, the room would get brighter. Exactly, but at the same time, the lights in all the other rooms of the house would dim for a moment. What? They dim? Because the gas is being redirected. Perhaps it's because when you light a gas lamp, it briefly uses more gas than usual, and that reduces the amount of gas in the pipe for the other lamps that are connected. That might explain why the other lamps dim momentarily, mightn't it? Yes, of course, because everything's connected to a single pipe. Is that supposed to happen, though? It sounds rather undesirable. Jolly good point. Fact is, the gas company's pipes in these parts are pretty hopeless, long worn out, and barely got any gas in them to start with. Opposite's also true, of course. Extinguish the lamps up here, and they glow brighter in the rest of the house. Ah, right, I see. So by watching the flickering of the lamps in one room, you can determine what's happening elsewhere. You've got it. Oh, of course, because when people come back home in the evening and before they go to sleep at night, what they're guaranteed to do is either light or put out their lamps and fires. Clever. In point of fact, the room on the ground floor and the one above it use slightly different amounts of gas. By watching the lights in here closely, I can work out almost exactly what's going on in the whole house. Gosh, that's fascinating, Mr. Gary. Absolutely fascinating. Ah, well, nothing to it, really. And I can't really see that it's going to help us with the case either, but it probably will. What I'd like to know is why Mr. Gary is so interested in what his tenants are up to in the first place. I don't really think that this is that unusual for a landlord, to be honest, especially an English one. You can't trust the English. I feel like there's more to it than idle curiosity. Well, we've done so much investigating, as much investigating as we can here, I think. Perhaps we ought to go to the prison and speak to Natsume again. A good idea. Alright, bro, see you till, tomorrow, probably. You look like you're enjoying yourself. Look, Mr. Naruhodo. Mr. Natsume, have the police finished questioning you now?
Locum student, Mr. Naruhodo Esquire.
Oh, yes?
What is he? Tell me, is he a ghost? Is he here to haunt me?
Let me guess, you're talking about Sholmes. He actually calls himself a great detective, Natsume, not a ghost.
But his diabolical deductions, they're not of this world. They've left me. Ah, cursed, I'm cursed, I tell you.
Well, that sort of hurts. Credit where credit is due, Mr. Naruhodo. You were heavily involved in the abduction. Yes, moving on. We have some wonderful news.
Oh.
The victim that we all thought was dead has come back to life. You look less than pleased. Now, in the absolutely worst case, you could only be tried for attempted murder. That's great, isn't it?
It's terrible.
Oh.
I'm stuck in the cell, suffering for some silly wrong end of the stick. You did it, didn't you? Confess, you're a killer. Why the mustache? Constant questions.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Ah, that selfish shyster. Make up your mind. Are you dead or alive? If you're going to come back to life, why bother dying? Wickedly wishy-washy William.
Well, it seems likely Shamspeare was never actually dead.
Ah, yes, that might make sense. I'm pleased to hear he's alive, of course. Our lively debate last night was much fun. I'd be sad to think it was our last.
Oh.
Oops.
Natsume, does this mean that you did see the victim last night? You met with Shamspeare, didn't you?
I'm not saying another word. I demand to have a lawyer present.
I am the lawyer. Please, Natsume, we need to hear your side of the story.
Why am I cursed like this?
So what you talk about? Can you tell us exactly what happened last night, Mr. Natsume?
There's nothing to tell. But, Mr. Naruhodo Esquire, I'm eternally grateful to you for helping me with that accursed case yesterday.
The case that saw the poor Miss Green hospitalized after she ended up with a knife in her back. It's hard to believe that was only yesterday.
After the trial was over, I trudged my weary way back to my lowly lodgings. And that evening, at past 9 it must have been, I visited Shamspeare.
So you did go to the victim's room, then? As we feared.
I didn't do anything wrong. I'd never been to his room before. It was the first time.
Then what made you decide to go?
I bumped into him when I arrived back at the house. We got to chatting and it developed into a discussion. But he had to go out, so I bade him farewell.
And that ties in with what Gary said. The victim went out and came back after 8.
We met again later that evening at around 9 or just after, when I took him some nice tea I'd brewed as a gift.
So it was you who brought the tea that had clearly been drunk at the scene. And I suppose you were discussing Shakespeare, were you?
Yes, that's right. That's exactly right. Romeo and Juliet. Who was the stronger? It was a delightful debate. We decided Juliet could bench press easily twice what Romeo could.
I'm sure.
Such a stimulating subject, Shakespeare.
And the debate became very heated, so you slipped.
Fucking relax. No, never, not at all. Team Juliet won, that was me, and when I left his room, the flamboyant fellow was fighting fit, I swear, categorically.
Mr. Natsume, you often say the same thing about yourself, I've noticed, that you have a cursed existence.
I'm sure I've mentioned this to you before, but I've been in Great Britain for a year now, and in that time I've learned it's no place for me.
It can be very trying to live in a foreign land and adapt to the ways of another culture.
There are foreigners everywhere I look, and they all stare at me, they all laugh. That's the impression I get whenever I go out. It makes me scared to leave my room. Which is why I've become a recluse, but even in my room I find no respite from my fears. I've moved more times than I can remember, and then 1 week ago I moved into Briar Road.
But why? I mean, why did you choose that place? It doesn't seem very comfortable.
Because the rent is cheap. I have so little money. It spoke to me.
The rent?
Obviously, there's a reason why it's cheap. Because the room is cursed.
Cursed? Cursed how?
The previous occupant, the man who lived there before I took the room, died there.
Oh no.
He was only a young man, but one morning he was found dead and no one could explain why.
Surely no one would want to live in a room with a history like that.
I didn't. When the letting agent recommended the place, I wavered. But I want books, and books cost money. A horrible history is a small price to pay. When I realized it would mean I could buy more books, I signed the lease like lightning.
Brave or blinkered.
But after I moved in, I soon came to realize what I'd done. I realized how horrible that room's history really was.
Gosh, was it really so awful? Illuminate us. How did the room's horrible history affect you, Natsume? What happened?
At first, it was just a feeling. The feeling of beady eyes boring into my back, watching me.
Maybe he is in the walls. Do you think that you might have just been your mind playing tricks on you?
No, my mind doesn't know any tricks. It was someone else. It's been one long nightmare ever since I was given the keys to the place.
A nightmare? You've been having bad dreams, you mean?
All the souls who have died in that room lean over me in my sleep and try to strangle me.
That really is horrible.
And now I come to think of it, it happened again last night, too. The very same night that Shamspeare was writhing in agony from the poison in his body. I was on the verge of being suffocated.
It's definitely the gas. You simply must move out of that room as soon as possible.
Yes, you're right. I know it, and that's why I'm already searching for the next room with a history to call home.
I think perhaps you should try to avoid a combination with any kind of history. Otherwise, I'm scared that you may yourself become history. Ooh, Sir Sato knows how to make the man listen.
Of course. My lord, Mr. Lord of the Manor is worried about the curse on my room as well.
You mean Mr. Gary?
Yes, he knows that if people keep dying there, he'll never be able to rent it out again.
Well, that's true. I, for one, wouldn't go near the place. Ah, perhaps. That may explain why the landlord pays so much attention to the gas lamps and his tenants' movements. You mean because he's worried that they might be fucking dead? He does seem to have an unusually keen interest in the amount of gas in the pipes. Must be a reason why he keeps such close tabs on the occupants of his let rooms.
What do you mean he pays so much attention to the gas lamps?
Oh dear, no, it's nothing to do with you, Mr. Natsume. Please forget I said anything.
Oh, now you're talking about me behind my back as well.
What's important is that Shamspeare isn't in fact dead. Once he's come round, he'll be able to tell us what happened. We'll be able to get you released.
Yes, please. Oh, I do hope you're right.
Excuse me. Inspector Gregson. Oh, I couldn't help overhearing what you just said, and on that note, he's fucking dead. I have some bad news and some good news. Oh, which you want first?
Always, every time, the bad news comes first. When hope is all you have, hold on to it. That's my guiding principle.
Right, well, in that case, the good news it is. Huh? Sorry, but it's just a lot easier to explain everything that way.
Then why did you ask my preference?
As you might have heard, the victim, Mr. Shamspear, was just unconscious. He's come round now.
Oh good, he's not dead, I guess. Yes, we saw it happen in its terrifying glory.
He's still being treated by the doctors, but we've managed to get a written statement from him. He said he did it.
Isn't that wonderful, Natsume?
Oh, thank goodness. It's all over then. I can leave this somber cell.
Sorry. No, that's not on the cards.
What?
Why ever not, Inspector?
Mr. Shamspear has implicated someone as being responsible for what happened.
Implicated someone? Oh dear.
You don't mean...
I'm sorry to say I do. Yes, he's pointed the finger at you, Natsume.
Ah!
By sweet poison did he seeketh to end my life. That wickedst cat caitiff, so seki Natsume.
No.
So I'm afraid you'll be appearing in court as planned. You'll be wanting to make the necessary preparations.
No.
And so, once again, Soseki-san found himself having to take dock in the Old Bailey. Whether his room was haunted or whether he was just terribly unlucky, I knew I had no choice. The following day, I would represent him in court and do my utmost to break... It's the next fucking day? Damn. Alright, can't wait to find out what's going on with this one.